The chandeliers of the Plaza Hotel glittered like frozen stars above Manhattan's richest crowd. Cameras flashed, champagne glasses clinked, and whispers traveled faster than the music. Grace Bennett stood near the marble column, her black satin dress stretching slightly over her 6-month belly. She had rehearsed her smile all evening, but it cracked when she saw him. Cole Harrington, her husband, the man who once swore she was his entire world, now entering the ballroom with Lana Voss, a 26-year-old model draped in silver. Their hands intertwined, her laughter echoing like a bell. The entire room turned, every phone lifted. Grace's breath hitched as a photographer's iPhone captured that exact moment, her stunned eyes locking on Cole's confident grin. "Who's the pregnant one?" Someone whispered behind her. "The ex-wife, apparently," another replied. Her ears rang. Just last year, Cole and Grace had stood in the same hall, raising funds for her tech startup. Tonight, he raised his glass beside another woman while her company's name still glittered on the event banner. The hypocrisy burned. Grace tried to move, but her legs felt nailed to the marble floor. She saw her reflection in a crystal wall, pale, shaking, yet holding on. Cole approached their mutual investors, boasting about a new AI project that, ironically, used code Grace had built. Lana leaned on his arm, whispering sweetly, "They're all staring, baby." Cole smirked, loud enough for Grace to hear. "Let them. I've upgraded." The word upgrade sliced deeper than any knife. Someone brushed past, spilling champagne on her sleeve. She didn't flinch. Her pulse throbbed like a drumline in her ears. For a split second, she met Cole's gaze across the room. He looked away first. That was all she needed. Grace turned, walked out of the ballroom, heels clicking in sync with her heartbeat. Outside, the wind off Fifth Avenue hit her face like reality's slap. Cameras still followed. Tabloids would feast on this by morning. She pulled out her iPhone, hands trembling, and called one name, Adrian Chen, the mentor who once told her, "When the world burns you, build your own fire." The call rang twice. Then his calm voice answered, "Grace, what happened?" She whispered, "I think I just became the story." Her breath fogged against the taxi window as the city lights blurred into streaks of gold and sorrow. The plaza faded behind her like a broken crown. Somewhere inside her, something harder than grief began to form resolve. And as the cab turned toward Park Avenue, Grace swore this humiliation would be the last time anyone made her feel small. The next sunrise would not find a broken wife. It would meet a woman ready to fight. The taxi moved slowly down Fifth Avenue, its headlights slicing through Manhattan's glittering midnight rain. Grace Bennett pressed her forehead to the cold glass, watching the lights smear into streaks of gold and blue. Her reflection stared back, smudged mascara, trembling lips, a faint roundness under her black dress. She looked like a stranger, wearing her own pain. Her phone buzzed again, notifications exploding across social media. Photos from the Plaza Gala flooded the news feeds. Billionaire Cole Harrington debuts model girlfriend. His pregnant wife watches from the crowd. Grace's face, caught mid-breath, became a viral image. Thousands of strangers debated her life like a show. Some pitied her, others mocked her for marrying for money. She locked the screen. The silence afterward was deafening. Cole hadn't answered her calls for weeks, but she had hoped he was just drowning in work, not parading betrayal in front of every investor they once shared. He'd frozen her credit card last week, saying she spent too much on baby nonsense. She hadn't realized then it was the first move to erase her. The cab stopped at a red light beside a Cartier window display. Diamond necklaces shimmered behind glass, cold, perfect, untouchable. They looked like the life she once had. She thought of the nights Cole held her hand, promising to build an empire together. Now that empire was his alone. Grace reached into her purse and pulled out her MacBook Air. Her hands shook as she opened the email drafts from weeks ago, her pitch to Titan Cloud. The partnership proposal, Cole said, was too ambitious for a pregnant woman. She scrolled, eyes burning, until she reached Adrian Chen's message from months back. "If you ever want to build it without him, call me." Her breath hitched. Maybe this humiliation wasn't an ending. Maybe it was her chance to begin again. She opened a blank email, typed, "Subject, urgent, term sheet revival. Message, Adrian, I'm ready to move forward. I'll bring full documentation by morning." She hovered over send, hearing the rain drum against the taxi roof. A part of her hesitated fear, whispering, "You're alone now." Another voice, smaller but sharper, replied, "Then you have nothing left to lose." She pressed send. Her stomach tightened, her baby moved, as if reminding her why she had to fight. The cab driver, an older man with kind eyes, glanced in the mirror. "Rough night, miss?" She forced a weak smile. "You could say that. New York has a funny way," he said, "of breaking you before it makes you." Grace looked back at the wet streets, the reflections of Fifth Avenue's towers glimmering like watchful ghosts. Her mind replayed the gala. Cole's hand on Lana's waist, the laughter, the flash of the cameras. The humiliation twisted into anger. Beneath that anger, something steadier formed a plan. She opened her notes app and typed a to-do list. Recover code backup from old server. Prepare financial statements. Meet Adrian Bob 0:0 a.m. Titan Cloud HQ. Never, ever look back. When the taxi stopped in front of her apartment building, she paid in cash her last $50 bill. The driver handed her the receipt. "Keep the change," she said quietly. "It's the last thing he didn't control." Inside the lobby, the marble floors gleamed under sterile light. Her reflection looked stronger now. Not healed, but awake. She walked to the elevator, clutching her laptop close. The screen still glowed with Adrian's reply. "I'll be waiting. Bring everything." Grace exhaled, pressing the elevator button. The doors slid shut. The city outside roared on, rich, cruel, and alive. Tomorrow, she would stop being the betrayed wife. She would become the woman her husband should have feared. At 7:42 a.m., Manhattan was bathed in pale sunlight and the noise of ambition. Grace Bennett stood outside Titan Cloud's glass tower on Park Avenue, clutching her laptop and a folder of contracts against her chest. The crisp air smelled of coffee and rain-soaked concrete. Her heart pounded not just from nerves, but from the weight of everything riding on this meeting. She hadn't slept. The images of Cole and Lana had replayed in her mind until dawn, merging into the same nightmare. Laughter, cameras, betrayal. Now, the only sound she wanted to hear was opportunity knocking back. Inside the building, the marble lobby stretched like a cathedral of power, quiet, cold, and humming with authority. Every person who walked past seemed to know exactly where they belonged. Grace tried to steady her breathing. She'd once attended investor meetings with Cole in similar places, always standing 2 steps behind him, the supportive wife. Today, she was here for herself. The elevator chimed open on the 41st floor. The scent of fresh espresso and faint cologne filled the air. Adrian Chen was already waiting by the window, dressed in a navy suit, his sleeves rolled to the elbows. The skyline shimmered behind him, Central Park stretching into the distance like a green promise. "Grace," he said, turning with a soft smile. "I saw the headlines. You okay?" She hesitated. "Do I look okay?" He studied her face, eyes tired, yet burning with something new. "You look determined." They sat across a sleek walnut table. Grace pulled out her files, cash flow sheets, growth models, prototypes. "I can finish the product within 6 weeks, if I get the funding. 2 engineers from my old team will rejoin if I guarantee payment. 5. Adrian leaned back, scanning her proposal on his iPad. "You realize Titan's board doesn't invest lightly. And with recent publicity—" "I know," she cut in, voice steady. "But the code is mine. The concept is mine. The humiliation is his. I'm not asking for pity. I'm offering profit." That got his attention. Adrian smiled faintly. "Still as fierce as I remember." He turned the tablet toward her. "If I fund this, you'll need to separate your company from Cole completely. No shared IP, no joint ownership. He'll come after you." Grace opened her laptop, fingers flying over the keys. "Already handled. I pulled logs last night, proof I built the prototype months before he interfered." She showed him a time-stamped folder labeled Core V1.0. Adrian raised an eyebrow. "Smart. But are you ready for what comes next?" "He'll fight dirty." "I've been sleeping next to dirty for years," she replied. He nodded slowly. "Fair point." He stood, walking toward the window, watching the city pulse below. 2 million. That's the figure you need to scale. "Yes. Enough to stabilize and take full ownership." "Then you'll have it," he said finally. Grace froze. "Just like that?" He turned back, a knowing glint in his eyes. Just like that, but you'll sign today. Before he does anything stupid. A wave of relief nearly buckled her knees. She tried to speak, but her throat tightened. For a moment, she wasn't the humiliated wife on social media. She was the woman who'd built something worth fighting for. As Adrian began drafting the term sheet on his Mont Blanc, Grace's phone buzzed. A message flashed across the screen from an unknown number. You think you can outsmart me? Don't forget who owns your code. C. Her pulse spiked. Cole already knew. Somehow, he'd found out. Adrian looked up. Something wrong? Grace locked her phone and smiled faintly. Nothing that can't be fixed. She straightened her shoulders, signed the preliminary agreement, and handed him the pen back. Outside the window, the morning sun broke through the clouds. Manhattan glittered like a city reborn. Grace didn't realize it yet, but that signature just started a war. That evening, the penthouse on Central Park West felt like a museum of betrayal, silent, cold, perfectly staged. The scent of Lana's perfume still lingered in the air, a sweet reminder that Grace Bennett was no longer the queen of this place. She closed the door behind her, the soft click echoing through the marble halls like a gunshot. The lights were dim. A half-empty wineglass sat on the counter beside a discarded diamond earring. Lana's laughter seemed to still hang in the air, haunting her like a ghost. Grace walked past the grand piano Cole had insisted on buying for aesthetics, even though neither of them could play. Her wedding photo still stood on the console table, her in white, Cole beaming. For a moment, she wanted to smash it. Instead, she turned the frame face down. The city lights blinked outside like indifferent stars. Grace went into the home offices, the one Cole called our workspace, but had slowly turned into his personal empire. The MacBook on the desk was still logged into his account. She hesitated, then sat down and started digging. Folders, contracts, investor emails. Cole had built his empire partly on her innovation. And there it was, an unsigned document marked IP Transfer Harrington Capital. Her stomach twisted. The date was from last week. He was transferring ownership of her software to his company, using her married name as legal cover. Once signed, everything she created would belong to him. A knock at the door startled her. The maid, Carmen, peeked in timidly. Mrs. Bennett, Mr. Harrington said he'll be staying in Midtown for a few nights. Grace nodded. Thank you, Carmen. You can go home early. As the door closed, Grace whispered to herself, Midtown, or with her. She didn't need to ask. She already knew. She plugged in her backup drive, fingers trembling as she copied every file from his system. The loading bar crawled across the screen, minute after minute, like time itself was testing her. She remembered Cole's words from last year. You'd be nothing without me. The drive dinged, transfer complete. Grace disconnected it, tucked it into her purse, and turned to leave. But before she reached the door, she noticed something she hadn't before. An Amazon delivery box by the entrance, unopened. She tore it open out of reflex. Inside was a brand new hard drive, her earlier backup request, the one Cole claimed never arrived. Her last piece of evidence had been sitting here the entire time. For a second, she laughed quietly, bitterly. Then tears spilled over. She wasn't crying for him anymore. She was crying for the years she'd traded for his comfort. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a text from an unknown number. You think that deal will save you? Wait until I pull the plug. C. H. The words froze her. Cole had access to the main server. He could erase everything remotely. She grabbed her coat, clutching her belly. The baby kicked hard, almost like it knew the danger too. She whispered, Hang in there, little one. Mommy's got you. Grace ran to the elevator, pressing the button with shaking hands. As the doors slid shut, her reflection stared back, hair loose, eyes blazing. The calm before a storm. Below her, the city pulsed with sirens and headlights, alive with the heartbeat of millions who had no idea a digital war was about to begin above their skyline. And somewhere across town, Cole poured himself another drink, smiling, believing he'd already won. The next morning, Manhattan was painted in shades of silver and gold. Early sunlight dripped down the glass towers, slicing through the mist rising from the streets. Grace Bennett stepped out of a yellow cab, her breath visible in the cool air, a Starbucks latte warming her trembling hands. The city smelled of coffee and ambition. Today wasn't about survival anymore. It was about taking back control. The Titan Cloud building rose before her like a monument to everything she had once dreamed of becoming. Its mirrored surface reflected a woman who didn't quite look like herself anymore, pale, exhausted, but sharper somehow, forged in heartbreak. She took one deep breath, adjusted her blazer over her baby bump, and walked inside. The marble lobby hummed with quiet power. Executives in tailored suits moved briskly through the revolving doors, murmuring into AirPods. Grace joined them, blending in until she reached the security desk. "Grace Bennett," she said, voice steady. "Meeting with Adrian Chen." The guard scanned her name, nodded, and handed her a visitor badge. 41st floor. "He's expecting you." How? Inside the elevator, the glass walls revealed a rising view of Park Avenue steel, clouds, and money. Grace watched the skyline climb around her, the city that had witnessed both her success and humiliation. As the elevator doors opened, her pulse matched the rhythm of her heartbeat, strong, determined, alive. Adrian was waiting near the window again, a Mont Blanc pen in his hand, a quiet smile on his face. "You made it," he said. "I said I would," she replied. He gestured toward the conference room where two people waited, a corporate lawyer and Titan's financial officer. "We're ready to finalize the preliminary contract. But first," he handed her an iPad. "You'll need to confirm that every file is legally yours." Grace connected her backup drive, praying silently. When the folder opened, relief flooded her chest. All her code was intact. "Everything's here," she said. "Every line I wrote." "Good," Adrian said. "Then let's make it official." Lee. They sat together at the long walnut table. Grace reviewed the term sheet carefully. Titan Cloud would license her e-signature platform for $2 million, plus a 5% equity bonus if performance targets were met. The deal would instantly position her startup among the top SaaS players in the city and make her legally independent from Cole. When she reached the final page, her hand hesitated. "If I sign this," she said quietly, "I'm declaring war." Adrian's eyes softened. "Then let it be a smart war, not an emotional one." Grace nodded and signed. The sound of the Mont Blanc scratching across the paper felt like thunder wrapped in silk. As she slid the document back, the lawyer smiled politely. "Congratulations, Mrs. Bennett. Titan Cloud is proud to partner with you, Mrs. Bennett." The title felt strange, now no longer belonging to Cole, but to herself. Adrian stood, offering his hand. "You did it." Grace shook it, her grip firm. "No," she said, glancing at the skyline beyond the glass wall. "I'm just getting started." Her phone vibrated again, another message from Cole. "I warned you not to cross me. You'll regret this." She silenced the phone and slipped it into her purse. Outside, the city roared, taxis honking in a symphony of chaos. Somewhere, her former life was crumbling. But here, in this sunlit tower, Grace Bennett was rewriting her own script. She turned to Adrian with a faint smile. "Can you recommend a good corporate attorney? One who doesn't mind a little blood in the water?" Adrian chuckled softly. "You just met two of them." Grace exhaled, the weight of years lifting from her shoulders. For the first time in months, she felt the faint pulse of freedom. And as she walked out of that boardroom, she didn't know Cole was already preparing his counterattack. The 41st floor of Titan Cloud looked like another planet, glass walls, chrome reflections, and the hum of quiet authority. Grace Bennett sat at the end of a long walnut conference table, sunlight slicing through the windows behind her. The city stretched endlessly below, but her world had narrowed to the papers in front of her. This was the moment everything changed or collapsed. Across the table sat Adrian Chen, sleeves rolled up, eyes sharp with focus. Beside him, Titan's chief counsel, Olivia Marks, arranged documents with calm precision. "Grace," Olivia said, "this term sheet makes you the exclusive supplier for our digital signature framework, but it also severs all shared ownership with Harrington Capital. Are you prepared for what that means legally?" Grace nodded, though her pulse raced. "I am. He can't use my code again." Olivia leaned forward. "Once we file this with the SEC, Cole will lose every claim. But he'll come after you personally. Be ready." Grace inhaled slowly. "I've been ready since he walked into that ballroom with another woman." Adrian shot her a quick look of admiration. "Then let's make this official. The contract lay open before her Titan Cloud's $2 million licensing deal. The pages shimmered under the sunlight, every clause a weapon if used right. Grace reached for the Mont Blanc pen Adrian slid toward her. It was heavier than she expected, cold, real. As the tip touched the paper, her hand trembled for just a moment, then steadied. Grace Bennett. The signature bloomed like armor. Applause broke out softly in the room. "Congratulations," Olivia said. "You're officially independent." Grace smiled faintly, relief mixing with fear. "Independent," she repeated, almost to herself. "Feels like a new language." They moved on to operational details, API integrations, IP verifications, and onboarding schedules. Grace explained her product demo, how Titan's infrastructure could triple her speed. As she spoke, confidence replaced doubt. This wasn't just a deal, it was rebirth. Then her phone buzzed. She glanced down unknown number. She ignored it, continuing her presentation. Seconds later, another buzz, then another. Finally, Adrian noticed. "You should check that." Grace unlocked her phone. The message glowed on the screen. "You can sign all you want, Grace. But the code isn't yours anymore." C.H. Her blood ran cold. She quickly opened her developer portal. The live server offline. Every log, every deployment, vanished. Cole had shut down the main repository. Olivia frowned. "What's wrong?" "He pulled the server," Grace said, voice tightening. "He's trying to erase my proof of ownership." Adrian stood immediately. "Can you restore it?" "I have backups," she said, already reaching for her laptop. Her fingers flew over the keyboard, connecting to her private drive. Her baby kicked, a sharp reminder that she wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. "Server reconnecting," she muttered. "I encrypted everything under a secondary key. He can't kill it without my password." After several tense seconds, a blue screen blinked to life. Her files reappeared one by one. Relief washed through the room like air returning to a sealed space. Adrian exhaled. "Smart woman." Grace smirked weakly. "You don't survive a man like Cole without learning the game." "W." The lawyer chuckled under her breath. "Remind me not to cross you." When the meeting ended, Titan's executives left the room, but Adrian lingered. "He's not going to stop," he said quietly. "I don't need him to stop," Grace replied. "I just need him to fail." Outside, the late morning sun blazed against the skyline, reflecting off the glass tower like a mirror to her resolve. Grace picked up her laptop, the new contract tucked inside her folder. For the first time, she wasn't chasing his shadow, she was building her own. But miles away, Cole had already planned his next move. By late afternoon, Manhattan buzzed with the kind of energy that only follows breaking news. Digital billboards along Times Square flashed the headline every investor was reading. Titan Cloud signs $2 million deal with Grace Bennett. Underneath it, smaller text scrolled. Harrington Capital faces questions about IP ownership dispute. Jean. Cole Harrington sat inside his black Mercedes S-Class, trapped in rush-hour traffic, the glow of the ticker reflecting off his jaw. Lana Voss sat beside him, scrolling through her phone nervously. "Cole," she whispered, "they're tagging you everywhere. People are saying you stole her product." Cole snatched the phone from her hand. "Don't read that garbage. The media feeds on drama," but his knuckles whitened around the steering wheel. He knew this wasn't drama. It was strategy, and Grace had just outplayed him. His own face appeared on CNBC as the commentator spoke. Harrington Capital has remained silent after Titan Cloud confirmed a licensing deal directly with Bennett's team, effectively bypassing her husband's firm. Sources suggest internal conflict between the couple may have triggered the split. Cole muted the screen, his jaw tightening. "She's bluffing," he muttered. "She can't sustain operations without my network." Lana hesitated. "Maybe you should just talk to her." He turned sharply. "Don't tell me what to do." Traffic crawled forward. On the dashboard, his iPhone lit up emails pouring in from board members, investors, journalists. One subject line froze his blood cold. Urgent. Investors requesting emergency meeting, IP dispute risk. "God damn it," he roared, slamming his hand against the wheel. The horn blared, startling Lana. She bit her lip. "Cole people are saying she's the real founder." "That you." "Enough." He snapped. She was a face for the brand, nothing more. I built that company, but even as he said it, the words rang hollow. He remembered the nights Grace stayed up debugging code, her laptop glowing in the dark. He remembered dismissing her suggestions with a smirk. Now that same woman had turned the world against him with facts, not tears. Cole's phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from his attorney. Cole, you need to come in immediately. The board is calling an emergency review. This looks bad. He exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. Pull over, he told the driver. Lana looked worried. Are you okay? He forced a smirk. Relax. I've handled worse. But deep down, he knew he hadn't. Grace had done something more dangerous than leaving. She'd made herself untouchable. Across town, in Titan Cloud's cafeteria, Grace scrolled through the same headlines. Every outlet praised her resilience. Pregnant CEO defies billionaire husband. Investors she'd never met were reaching out on LinkedIn, offering partnerships. She sat quietly, sipping water, one hand resting on her stomach. Adrian walked in, holding 2 coffees. You've seen it, haven't you? Grace smiled faintly. It's everywhere. You just became the face of every underestimated woman in tech. She laughed softly. That wasn't the plan. Maybe not, he said, but it's working. Cunt. Her phone vibrated again this time, an incoming call from Cole Harrington. She stared at it, watching the name flash across the screen like a ghost she refused to resurrect. Adrian asked, You gonna answer? She shook her head. Not today. She silenced the call, placed the phone face down, and looked out at the Manhattan skyline tall, proud, and indifferent. Back in Midtown, Cole stepped into his firm's lobby, greeted not by assistance but by silence. Every head turned as he passed. On the glass wall, someone had taped the morning's headline. Grace Bennett outsmarts Harrington Capital. He ripped it down, fury burning behind his eyes. She wants war, he whispered. Then she'll have it. He didn't know that Grace had already moved her final piece, the one that would destroy him completely. The river calf shimmered under the Brooklyn Bridge, its windows glistening with reflections of Manhattan's golden skyline. Inside, the clink of silverware mixed with the low hum of jazz. It was the kind of place where billionaires closed deals and lovers ended them. Grace Bennett sat by the window, her latte untouched, hands clasped tightly around the cup for warmth. She wasn't here for the view. She was here to breathe. Adrian Chen arrived quietly, coat slung over his arm, rain still glistening on his hair. You look like you haven't slept, he said, sliding into the seat across from her. She smiled faintly. I didn't feels like I've been fighting ghosts all night. Ghosts don't text threats, he replied dryly. I read Cole's statement. He's accusing you of IP theft. Grace sighed, eyes drifting to the skyline beyond the glass. He's scared. He's realizing I don't need him anymore. Adrian studied her face. Do you? She looked down at her cup. I needed him to believe in me once. Now, I just need him to stay out of my way. Fided. The waiter approached, setting down 2 plates grilled salmon and risotto. Grace didn't touch hers. The baby kicked gently, a reminder that food mattered more than pride. She forced a bite, the flavor barely registering. You know what hurts, she said quietly. It's not the betrayal. It's realizing I built my dreams inside someone else's cage. Adrian leaned forward, elbows on the table. Then tear the cage apart, Grace. You already started. Her eyes glistened, but she smiled. You make it sound easy. It's not, he said, his tone softening. But it's worth it. A moment of silence hung between them, filled with the sound of rain tapping the glass. Adrian broke it first. Titan's PR team is preparing a statement. They'll stand by you. But if Cole sues, this gets ugly. Are you sure you're ready for that? Grace looked up, resolve hardening in her eyes. He already made it ugly when he walked into that ballroom with her. I'm just cleaning up the mess. Munted. Adrian smiled faintly, admiring her composure. You know, I've seen founders fall apart for less, but you get calmer when things explode. She shrugged lightly. Maybe that's what heartbreak does. It burns off fear. Her phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. She opened the message this time, a screenshot. It was a document labeled IP Transfer Agreement with her forged signature. Cole was claiming she'd already sold him her rights. Grace's pulse spiked. He forged my signature, she whispered. Adrian's expression darkened. That's criminal. We'll handle it. You just focus on staying healthy. Grace closed her eyes for a moment, breathing through the wave of panic. She pictured the baby, safe and growing. She couldn't fall apart, not now. He wants to break me, she said. But the thing about breaking a woman who's already been burned, there's nothing left to destroy. Adrian watched her quietly, then said, You're stronger than you think. You? Her lips curved slightly. And he's weaker than he pretends. Outside, the rain stopped. The skyline glowed in soft orange light, the city almost tender for once. Grace stared out the window, seeing her reflection overlap with Manhattan's towers, her past and future colliding in glass. When she turned back, Adrian was watching her not with pity, but with quiet respect. You're going to win this, he said simply. She nodded, gripping her phone like a weapon. No, Adrian, she corrected, her voice low and steady. I'm going to end it. As the bridge lights flickered on above them, Grace made a silent vow by the next sunset. Cole would realize he'd just declared war on the wrong woman. By sunrise the next morning, Grace Bennett's life was splashed across every news outlet in New York. Her phone vibrated endlessly on the kitchen counter of her small rented apartment. Headlines scrolled across the TV. Pregnant tech founder betrayed by billionaire husband now. Worth $2 million. Inside the Harrington scandal. Power, lies, and the woman who outsmarted Wall Street. But it wasn't just the headlines that made the city hold its breath, it was the photo. A tabloid photographer had caught Cole Harrington and Lana Voss leaving a private midtown club at 2 a.m., champagne in hand, his arm around her waist. Her lipstick smeared across his collar. The caption read, Cole Harrington's celebration turned sour, caught partying, while his pregnant wife fights for justice. The image went viral within hours. Social media exploded with fury. Hashtags like #Justice for Grace and #Women in Tech trended across platforms. Cole's investors were panicking. His reputation, once flawless, was now cracking in real time. Grace watched the coverage in silence, a cup of chamomile tea trembling slightly in her hand. She didn't smile. There was no satisfaction in public humiliation, only exhaustion. But somewhere deep inside, a flicker of poetic justice warmed her chest. Her phone buzzed again this time, Adrian Chen calling. Grace, he said, voice firm, you need to see this. She opened her email. Adrian had forwarded a copy of a Wall Street Journal feature. Grace Bennett, From Betrayal to Boardroom. The article painted her not as a victim, but as a visionary. It detailed her tech deal with Titan Cloud, her innovation, her resilience. The journalist had written, while her husband sought power, she built purpose. Grace exhaled slowly, tears threatening to spill. For the first time, the world was seeing her not through Cole's shadow, but as her own name. But the piece lasted barely 10 minutes. Her screen lit up again, this time with an unknown number and a video attachment. Her instincts told her not to open it, but curiosity won. The video showed Cole pacing inside a boardroom, yelling at his PR manager. I made her. She was nothing before me, he roared. Now she's turning investors against me. You fix this, or you're all fired. The manager's calm reply sealed his fate. Sir, you did that to yourself. Grace felt a cold shiver of disbelief. Someone had leaked it, and whoever did had just driven another nail into Cole's empire. Meanwhile, in Midtown, Cole slammed his laptop shut and threw his phone across the room. Lana stood by the window, pale. Cole, maybe we should leave the city for a while, she suggested. He glared at her. Leave? You think I'm running? They'll move on. The press always does. But even he didn't sound convinced. His phone kept buzzing with notifications, clients suspending contracts, investors withdrawing funds, journalists requesting comments. That afternoon, Grace took a slow walk along Central Park West, needing air. The fall leaves crunched under her shoes. She watched joggers pass, couples laugh, and dogs chase frisbees. For a few moments, life looked normal again. A woman approached her hesitantly. Are you Grace Bennett? Grace nodded. The woman smiled softly. You don't know me, but thank you. For showing women like us we don't have to stay silent. Grace felt her throat tighten. Thank you, she whispered. When the woman walked away, Grace realized something profound. This fight had become bigger than her. It wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming worth. Her phone buzzed once more. A text from Adrian. Be ready. Titan's lawyers found something in Cole's filings. You're going to want to see this. Grace's grip on the phone tightened as she turned toward the direction of Park Avenue. Somewhere in those documents, the real weapon waited, and Cole's downfall was only beginning. The next morning, rain slicked the streets of downtown Manhattan. Grace Bennett arrived at a glass office tucked between two skyscrapers, a corporate notary service where legal handovers happened quietly but permanently. She wore a beige trench coat over a navy dress, her belly now visibly round. Her hair was pulled into a low bun, her face calm but unreadable. Today wasn't about emotions. Today was about precision. Adrian Chen was already there, standing by the window with Olivia Marks, Titan Cloud's legal counsel. On the conference table lay a stack of freshly printed papers and a single silver pen. The air smelled faintly of toner and espresso. Olivia looked up. Grace, this is it. Once we sign these, your new entity, Bennett Technologies LLC, officially owns every line of code, patent, and client under your name. Harrington Capital will have zero claim. Grace nodded. And Cole can't touch it? Not legally, Olivia replied. But he'll try. Men like that don't lose gracefully. Well, Grace placed her MacBook on the table, unlocking her encrypted drive. Here's the final backup signed, time-stamped, and mirrored on Titan's server. She glanced at Adrian. If he tries to fabricate documents again, we'll have digital proof. Adrian's lips twitched into a half-smile. I like the way you think. As they reviewed the final clause, thunder rumbled faintly outside. It felt symbolic, like the world was holding its breath for what she was about to do. Grace picked up the pen. The metal was cold, heavy with history. For a second, she remembered the first contract she'd ever signed with Cole when she was 24 and Nav, trusting love more than logic. Never again. She signed slow, deliberate strokes. Grace Bennett. Olivia notarized the document, stamped it with a satisfying click. Congratulations, she said. You're officially free. Grace exhaled, a tremor escaping her chest. Free. The word tasted new. Then the door burst open. Two men in dark suits strode in, followed by a familiar voice that made Grace's blood run cold. Not so fast, Cole Harrington said, his tone casual but edged with venom. His lawyer, Jonathan Cross, stepped forward, waving a file. We're serving an injunction. Mr. Harrington claims intellectual property theft and seeks a temporary freeze on all transactions until a court hearing. Olivia stiffened. This is harassment, and you know it. Cole smirked. Just business, darling. Can't let my pregnant wife commit fraud unchecked. Grace stood, facing him squarely. You forged my signature, Cole. You used my work to get your funding. You think that makes you a businessman? That makes you a thief in a suit. His eyes darkened. Careful. You're playing a dangerous game. So are you, she shot back. But I have something you don't evidence. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small Amazon box, opening it slowly. Inside was the original hard drive Cole had hidden weeks ago, unopened, still sealed, time-stamped. Grace placed it gently on the table. This drive contains every commit I ever made, every timestamp, every email between us. You think the court won't notice your edits? For the first time, Cole's smirk faltered. Adrian crossed his arms. I'd advise you to leave, Harrington, before you make this worse. Cole glared at him. Stay out of this, Chen. You think you can buy your way into my company? Adrian smiled thinly. It's not yours anymore. The tension in the room crackled. Then Cole turned sharply, storming out with his lawyer. The echo of his footsteps faded down the hallway. Grace's knees almost gave way. But Adrian caught her arm. You okay? She nodded faintly. I think I just won round one. Outside, the storm finally broke, rain pounding against the glass. Grace stared out at the blurred skyline, the weight of her courage finally sinking in. She didn't know it yet, but that hard drive wasn't just her proof of innocence. It was the weapon that would finish him. 3 days later, the summons arrived. Thick paper, embossed seal, cold as justice. Grace Bennett stood in her apartment kitchen holding the envelope, her coffee untouched, her pulse hammering in her ears. The document inside confirmed what she already suspected. Cole Harrington had filed a lawsuit in the New York Supreme Court, accusing her of intellectual property theft, breach of contract, and marital fraud. He was actually suing his pregnant wife. Grace read it twice, then a third time. Each paragraph bled arrogance, written by the same attorney who'd once toasted their anniversary. Cole was claiming she had stolen proprietary technology belonging to Harrington Capital. He wanted her accounts frozen, her deal with Titan Cloud suspended, her entire company dismantled. Her phone buzzed, Adrian calling. "Grace, I just heard," he said, his voice tight. "He filed this morning. I've already forwarded it to Olivia." Grace tried to keep her voice steady. "He's faster than I thought. He's desperate," Adrian said. "But we'll counter. You have the original code and timestamps. That's gold in court." She nodded, staring out at the rainy Manhattan skyline. "Then we fight." Later that day, she met Adrian and Olivia at Titan Cloud's law offices, a minimalist space overlooking Bryant Park. The atmosphere was tense but electric. Olivia spread the lawsuit across the table. "He's claiming your code was built while under Harrington employment, which would make it marital property." Grace frowned. "But I developed it before we married. I even presented it at that tech incubator in Brooklyn." "Do you still have proof?" Olivia asked. Grace hesitated. "Somewhere in my old Gmail drafts." Adrian tapped his phone. "Then find it. That's your bullet." While Olivia outlined the defense strategy, Grace felt the baby move, soft but insistent. It was as if her child knew this wasn't just about revenge, it was about survival. That evening, she sat alone at her desk, scrolling through old emails. She found one dated 2 years before the marriage, an early prototype presentation she'd sent to a friend. Her own words stared back at her, proof she was the creator. She forwarded it to Olivia with shaking hands. Minutes later, Olivia replied, "This wins us the case." The next morning, court filings hit the press. Harrington versus Bennett, billionaire husband sues pregnant wife in tech feud. The story exploded across Wall Street forums. Public opinion turned against Cole faster than lightning. Commentators called him ruthless, cowardly, unhinged. Cole, meanwhile, stormed through his midtown office, furious. "They're twisting it," he shouted at his PR team. "I'm defending my assets," his assistant whispered. "Sir, investors are freezing funds until this clears." He slammed his desk. "I built this empire." "Maybe," she said quietly, "but she built the product." That night, as Grace prepared documents for her hearing, her doctor called. "Grace, your stress levels are dangerous. You need rest." She smiled weakly. After the verdict, "When? Don't push yourself," the doctor warned. "The baby needs peace." Grace hung up and looked at her reflection in the dark window. Her face was pale but fierce. "So do I," she murmured. The next morning, she walked into the courthouse in a navy maternity suit, head held high. Flashbulbs exploded around her. Reporters shouted questions. "Grace, did he steal your work? Are you afraid?" She paused at the steps, resting a hand on her belly. "I'm not afraid of the truth," she said simply, then walked inside. Adrian met her by the elevator. "Ready?" "Ready," she said. As the courtroom doors closed behind them, the noise of the city faded. And when the judge entered, Grace realized this wasn't just a lawsuit, it was judgment day for everything Cole had ever taken from her. The same morning Grace Bennett stepped into the courthouse. Cole Harrington was pacing the length of his glass-walled boardroom on Park Avenue. Harrington Capital had never been this quiet. Usually, the air buzzed with ringing phones and deal talk. Now, only the low hum of the HVAC filled the silence. On the table in front of him were 3 newspapers: the Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg, and Forbes. All 3 carried the same headline: Grace Bennett takes the stand. Billionaire's wife accuses husband of IP theft. The subheading hit harder. Sources confirm evidence of forged signatures. Cole threw the papers across the room. They scattered like birds. "Lies," he hissed. "All of it." His CFO, a thin man named Douglas, cleared his throat carefully. "Sir, the investors are panicking. We've lost 2 major LPs since yesterday." Cole glared at him. "We'll fix it. Release a statement." Say Grace is emotionally unstable, pregnancy, stress, hormones, whatever works. Douglas hesitated. With respect, sir, that could backfire. Public sentiments with her. Then find another angle. Cole barked, slamming his fist on the table. I built this firm from nothing, and no one, especially not her, is going to destroy it. The door opened quietly. A member of the board, Eleanor Briggs, entered. Elegant, mid-50 seconds, her stare could freeze air. Cole, she said evenly. The board's called an emergency meeting. You'll need to explain the missing funds from the R&D account. Cole's pulse jumped. That's internal allocation, perfectly legal. Eleanor arched an eyebrow. Then you won't mind showing us the receipts. When the board members gathered, the mood turned hostile fast. Projectors displayed charts, discrepancies in budgets, millions shifted between shell accounts. Grace's lawsuit had triggered an audit. Now, everything was unraveling. Cole, one investor said sharply, we trusted you because you claimed ownership of her software. But if that's false, you've misrepresented assets. That's fraud. Cole leaned forward, trying to keep his voice calm. Gentlemen, she's manipulating the narrative. She's angry. Emotional. You all know how one. Eleanor cut in. Stop hiding behind that. The code was hers, and you knew it. A heavy silence followed. The only sound was the faint buzz of his phone. A notification flashed. SEC inquiry opened, Harrington Capital. His throat tightened. What's this? Douglas avoided his gaze. It seems the SEC is reviewing our filings. The press attention drew them in. Cole's hand went cold. Get them on the phone. You can't stop it, Douglas said quietly. Not this time. Across town, in the courthouse hallway, Grace sat with Adrian and Olivia as the hearing recessed for lunch. Her phone lit up with the same alert. SEC investigation launched against Harrington Capital. She looked at Adrian, stunned. He smiled faintly. Told you truth has gravity. Back in the boardroom, Cole tried to rally. We can spin this, he insisted. I'll call in favors. Eleanor gathered her papers. Cole, you've lost the room. We're voting this afternoon on your suspension. He rose, furious. You can't do that. We already have the votes, she said. Effective immediately. Cole stood frozen, surrounded by the men and women who once bowed to him. The skyline glared behind the glass, indifferent. As security escorted him out, phones clicked, photos and irony too sharp to miss. The man who once loved cameras now hid his face from them. That night, Grace received a message from an unknown number. It contained only 2 words. He's out. She stared at it, her hands trembling not from fear, but from the quiet, dawning realization that the empire built on her back was finally cracking. For the first time, the world was beginning to see who the real architect had been all along. By the end of the week, Manhattan was a storm of flashing headlines. Grace Bennett's name had become synonymous with resilience, Cole Harrington's with disgrace. Yet the true blow came not from courtrooms or boardrooms, but from the front page of the New York Times Sunday edition. The headline stretched across the fold. The man who stole her code. Inside the collapse of Harrington Capital. Below it was a photograph of Cole at a gala, whispering something to Lana Voss while Grace stood in the background, visibly pregnant, unaware she was being erased. The photo alone told the entire story. Grace sat in her apartment reading the article, her tea forgotten. Every detail was precise, factual, devastating. The journalist had uncovered a series of emails showing Cole using Grace's prototype to pitch investors months before she ever joined Harrington Capital. There were screenshots of his digital forgeries, her falsified signature, metadata altered. It was undeniable. Adrian called the moment she finished reading. You saw it? Yes, she whispered. How did they get those emails? Anonymous source, he replied. Someone close to him. Grace's eyes flickered. Lana, she murmured. Across town, Lana Voss sat alone in her high-rise condo, scrolling through her phone. The interview she'd given to the Times had gone live that morning. She hadn't done it for revenge. She'd done it to clear her conscience. Her quote was now trending. He promised me the world, but it was built on someone else's work. Jen Lane. Meanwhile, Cole's phone wouldn't stop ringing. His lawyer, his PR firm, even his mother, they all wanted answers. He threw the phone across the room, glass shattering against the floor. She set me up, he growled. That snake set me up. Jonathan Cross, his lawyer, picked up the fragments of composure. You need to go silent, Cole. No interviews, no statements. The SEC case just got teeth. Cole's voice was ice. She'll regret this. But the world had already turned. Sponsors withdrew, banks froze accounts, investors ghosted. Cole's once private penthouse felt like a tomb. At Titan Cloud, Adrian entered Grace's office with 2 cappuccinos. You've officially become a case study, he said, setting one in front of her. She smiled weakly. In what? In how to dismantle a billionaire with nothing but receipts. They both laughed softly. For the first time in months, her laughter didn't sound forced. Then Olivia burst into the room. Grace, you need to see this. She turned the laptop toward them. On live television, Cole was giving a statement outside his office building, flanked by his lawyer. Cameras flashed wildly. His voice trembled not from guilt, but from desperation. I made mistakes, he said, but Grace wouldn't have succeeded without my connections. I built her platform. I supported her. She's ungrateful. Reporters shouted questions. Did you forge her signature? Did you manipulate investors? Cole's jaw tightened. No comment. Grace watched, stunned by how far he'd fallen. The man who once controlled every narrative couldn't even finish a sentence. Then Adrian's phone buzzed. He read the text, eyebrows lifting. Grace, the judge just accepted your motion for full IP ownership. It's official. She froze. You mean it's done? It's done, he said. Legally, the product, the company, it's all yours. Grace leaned back in her chair, the weight of months slipping off her shoulders. Her eyes filled with tears, but this time they were quiet, victorious ones. She whispered, I didn't destroy him. He did it to himself. Adrian smiled. That's how justice works. Outside, New York glowed under a sharp winter Sunday. The same city that once whispered about her humiliation now celebrated her triumph. And as Cole stared at his reflection in a shattered TV screen, he finally realized his empire had fallen to the woman he underestimated most. The chaos faded slowly, like a city after rain. For the first time in months, Grace Bennett woke to silence, not the buzz of reporters or the ping of legal updates, but the soft hum of morning light spilling into her borrowed apartment on the Upper West Side. She wasn't in the penthouse anymore, and she didn't miss it. The luxury, the marble floors, the coldness, it had all belonged to someone else's world. The apartment was small, warm, and filled with mismatched furniture donated by friends. On the windowsill sat a tiny pot of lavender, and beside it, her laptop. The code for her next update was open, the cursor blinking patiently. Grace tied her hair back and took a sip of coffee, cheap, instant, but somehow more satisfying than anything Cole's house ever offered. Her baby kicked softly. She smiled. You feel that, little one? Peace. Finally. A knock sounded at the door. She opened it to find Adrian holding a grocery bag and 2 cups of coffee. You're working already? He said, amused. Code doesn't write itself, she replied with a grin. He stepped inside, placing the groceries on the counter. You're supposed to be resting. The court just ruled in your favor, Grace. You can afford 1 morning off. I rested for 6 years, she said softly. Now I build. 1. He chuckled, watching her fingers dance across the keyboard. You really don't stop, do you? Neither does he, she murmured. Adrian's expression shifted. Cole? She nodded. He's quiet. Too quiet. That means he's planning something. She was right. Across town, in a rented office, stripped of his former grandeur, Cole sat surrounded by empty whiskey bottles and the glow of a single monitor. His empire was gone, but his ego wasn't. He replayed the Times interview, Lana's confession, Grace's courtroom triumph. His hands clenched. She took everything, he muttered. Everything. He opened a hidden file, private archive. Inside were confidential Titan Cloud contracts, stolen through a still-active company email. His lips twisted into a smirk. You built your company on my code? Fine. Let's see how the world feels about Titan's golden deal when it crashes. That afternoon, Grace and Adrian walked through Central Park. The leaves were shades of amber and gold, the air cool and alive. She breathed deeply, enjoying the rare calm. I used to think success meant marble floors and private jets, she said. Now it just means having peace. Adrian glanced at her. Peace looks good on you. For a brief moment, they both stopped. The wind carried the faint sound of children laughing in the distance. Grace touched her stomach. He's kicking again. Adrian smiled. He knows his mom's unstoppable. Her phone buzzed. A notification popped up. System breach. Detected Titan cloud server accessed. Her heart froze. No, she whispered. Not again. Adrian immediately called Titan's IT head. Lock everything down now. They rushed to his car. The city's noise suddenly louder, sharper. Grace's laptop pinged non-stop. Someone was inside her servers, deleting files, planting fake invoices, destroying credibility. It's him, she said, voice shaking. He's trying to drag Titan into this. Not if we move first, Adrian said, speeding through the traffic toward the Titan office. Within an hour, Olivia and the cybersecurity team traced the breach to a single IP address registered under Harrington Capital's name. Grace stared at the screen, a mix of fury and disbelief. He really doesn't know when to stop. Olivia smiled grimly. Good. Because this time, we'll end him legally. Grace turned toward the Manhattan skyline. Her reflection in the glass was no longer that of a frightened wife, but a warrior. And as the city lights flickered on, she made a silent promise this would be the last time Cole Harrington ever hurt her or anyone else again. The next morning, Manhattan was glowing with a deceptive calm, the kind that comes before a storm. Grace Bennett adjusted the cuffs of her navy suit as the elevator ascended to the top floor of Titan Cloud's headquarters. Her belly was heavy now, her steps slower, but her eyes were clear and resolute. Today wasn't about survival anymore. It was about confrontation. Inside the glass-walled boardroom, tension simmered like electricity. Executives from Titan Cloud and Harrington Capital's remaining investors filled the long table. Cameras were set up for the press, reporters waiting outside the door. It wasn't just a meeting, it was a reckoning. Adrian Chen stood beside her, calm and steady, his Mont Blanc pen tapping softly on the folder in front of him. You ready for this? He asked quietly. Grace smiled faintly. I've been ready since the night he called me an upgrade away from obsolete. The doors opened. Cole Harrington strode in, wearing a tailored gray suit that couldn't hide the cracks beneath the surface. His face looked older, haunted by sleepless nights and headlines. He stopped at the far end of the table, his gaze colliding with Grace's. Well, he said with forced charm, seems my wife has quite the flair for drama. Grace's voice was calm, razor-sharp. Ex-wife. And this isn't drama, Cole. It's accountability. A murmur rippled through the room. The moderator, a senior investor named Howard Lang, cleared his throat. We're here to address concerns regarding IP ownership, ethical misconduct, and the future of both parties' business interests. Mr. Harrington, you requested this summit. You may begin. Cole smiled thinly. Thank you, Howard. Ladies and gentlemen, what's happening here is a tragedy. My company, our company, was hijacked by a woman exploiting sympathy in the media. She's painted herself as a victim to steal what I built. Grace's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. Adrian leaned forward, whispering, "Wait for it." Cole continued, voice growing louder. I invested millions, nurtured her ideas, gave her a platform, and this is how she repays me by turning Titan against me, by staging a PR war. Howard looked unimpressed. Do you have proof of any of these claims? Cole hesitated, then pulled out a USB drive. Right here. Financial records showing Bennett Technologies using stolen data from Harrington servers. Grace raised an eyebrow. That's bold, she said softly, considering those servers were shut down by the SEC last week. A murmur of confusion swept the room. Howard frowned. Is that true? Adrian slid a printed statement across the table. Filed 3 days ago. The SEC froze all Harrington systems pending investigation. Any data retrieved since then is inadmissible and illegal. Cole's face drained of color. Olivia, Titan's counsel, stood and pressed a button on the projector. The screen behind her flickered to life, displaying an email chain. This, she said clearly, is from Cole Harrington's private account. It outlines a plan to leak Titan data to short-sell its stock. Gasps filled the room. The timestamps matched the night of the breach. Cole lunged forward. That's fake. Grace didn't flinch. You said that before. Every time the truth caught up to you. Security moved subtly toward the door. The investors whispered among themselves. Howard sighed heavily. Mr. Harrington, I think we're done here. Cole's voice cracked, desperate. You can't shut me out. She stole everything from me. Tom. Grace stood slowly, her hand resting on her stomach. No, Cole. I just took back what was mine. You destroyed yourself. For a moment, time stood still, the city lights flickering through the windows, cameras clicking like judgment itself. Then Howard announced, effective immediately, all remaining Harrington Capital shares will be liquidated and reassigned under Titan's oversight. Mr. Harrington, you are formally removed from all board affiliations. Cole staggered back, pale. You can't. I already did, Howard said firmly. Grace looked at him one last time, her voice calm but final. Goodbye, Cole. And as security escorted him out, Grace finally realized winning wasn't loud. It was quiet, clean, and absolute. That night, after the investor summit ended and Cole Harrington was officially stripped of power, Manhattan looked strangely peaceful. The streets glowed under a thin drizzle, traffic lights bleeding red and gold across the wet pavement. Grace Bennett sat alone by her apartment window, a cup of tea cooling in her hands, the city stretched out like a living heartbeat below. She should have felt victorious. Instead, she felt hollow. Winning didn't erase scars, it just made them visible in softer light. The headlines had already crowned her, the woman who beat Wall Street. Her face was everywhere: TV, social media, podcasts. But in the quiet, away from the noise, Grace felt something deeper: exhaustion, the kind that sits inside your bones. Her baby moved again. She pressed a hand to her belly and whispered, "It's over now. You're safe." But even as she said it, thunder cracked in the distance. She knew better. Men like Cole didn't disappear, they regrouped. Her phone buzzed. Adrian's name lit up. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked when she answered. She smiled faintly. "Wasn't planning to?" "You?" "Reviewing Titan's security logs. Cole's access is fully revoked." "But Grace, we caught something." Einmar. Her chest tightened. "What?" "An email sent from his account an hour ago. To a known financial blogger. He's threatening to leak evidence that you fabricated your coding timestamps. He's trying to taint the victory before it settles." Grace's fingers went cold around the mug. "So he's still fighting." "Desperately," Adrian said. "But don't worry, Titan's legal team is already drafting an injunction." She hesitated. What if he doesn't care about injunctions? What if he just wants to burn everything down? "Then we make sure the fire can't touch you," he said quietly. After they hung up, Grace sat for a long time in silence, watching lightning crawl across the skyline. Then she stood, walked to her desk, and opened a fresh notebook. She began writing a letter, long and unfiltered. "To my son," she began. "If you're reading this one day, know that your mother wasn't fearless. She was terrified most of the time. But fear is just proof that you still have something worth protecting." Her handwriting trembled slightly as she continued. "You'll hear stories about what happened, about the scandal, the lawsuits, the fall of Harrington Capital. But remember this: power means nothing if it isn't built with integrity. I didn't fight your father because he hurt me. I fought him because I refused to let deceit define our family's name." She paused, wiping a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. "And if someday someone tries to take what's yours, don't fight them with anger. Fight them with truth." She closed the notebook and placed it on the nightstand beside her hospital bag, already packed. Her due date was just weeks away. Outside, thunder rolled closer. Grace turned off the lights, but sleep refused to come. She got up again, wrapped a blanket around herself, and walked out to the small balcony. From there, she could see the Manhattan skyline reflected in the East River, an empire of glass and ghosts. In one of those towers, Cole sat in darkness too, staring at the bottle of bourbon in his hand. He had lost everything: money, status, reputation. But pride, that stubborn poison, still burned in his veins. He whispered into the empty room, "You think this is over, Grace? It's not over until you bleed like I did." Lightning flashed, illuminating his face, bitter, broken, and desperate. Back in her apartment, Grace whispered a quiet prayer, not for victory, but for peace. "Let this end without hate," she murmured. "Please." But fate, cruel and deliberate, had already decided the storm that would test everything she'd built was only hours away. The following morning, the air above Manhattan was razor-sharp, clear after the storm. The city had woken to a new headline splashed across every business network. Titan Cloud CEO to announce major women in tech initiative. 1. But for the insiders, there was a deeper story. The press conference would be Grace Bennett's first public appearance since the downfall of Cole Harrington. At 9 a.m., the lobby of Titan's Park Avenue headquarters thrummed with cameras, reporters, and bright lights. The elevator doors slid open, and Grace stepped out, radiant but calm. Her navy blazer framed her small pregnancy bump-like armor. Her hair was pulled back, her diamond-studded wedding band long gone. Adrian Chen met her at the podium. "You sure you're up for this?" he whispered. Grace smiled faintly. "After what I've survived, I can handle a few microphones." The crowd hushed as she faced the flashing cameras. The first row was lined with journalists from the Wall Street Journal, Forbes, and CNBC. Behind them, a sea of curious faces, investors, employees, even a few skeptics waiting for her to stumble. Grace adjusted the mic. "Good morning. A year ago, I was just another developer trying to build something meaningful. I stood behind someone else's name, someone else's vision. Today, I stand behind my own." The room was silent, except for the shutter clicks. "My story isn't about revenge," she continued. "It's about resilience. About every woman told she isn't strong enough, smart enough, or calm enough to lead. I was told those things by the man who claimed to love me." She paused, scanning the crowd. "And yet, here we are." 1. Applause broke through the tension, brief but powerful. Adrian watched her with quiet pride. This wasn't the woman he'd met months ago, shaken and humiliated. This was Grace Bennett, CEO, founder, survivor. She clicked to the next slide behind her. The Bennett Initiative. Empowering expectant women in technology. The program promised startup grants, mentorships, and healthcare support for women balancing pregnancy and careers. "Because," she said, voice steady, "motherhood isn't a weakness. It's a blueprint for endurance." The crowd erupted in cheers. Then, as the applause faded, a reporter raised her hand. "Grace, what would you say to those who claim your success came only after your husband's downfall?" Grace didn't flinch. "Then they weren't paying attention. My success began the day I stopped needing his approval." Laughter rippled through the room, followed by another burst of applause. But as the cameras flashed, something caught her eye. A figure standing near the exit doors. Cole Harrington. Unshaven, eyes sunken, watching her like a ghost haunting his own past. Their eyes met. He gave a small mocking bow before turning to leave. Her stomach tightened, but she didn't break her composure. She turned back to the microphone, her voice strong. "Before we close, one more thing. Every system can be rebuilt from code to conscience. And every woman can rebuild herself too." Mon. The room rose to its feet. Cameras flashed brighter, voices shouted questions. Grace smiled, nodded, and stepped away from the podium. Adrian joined her in the hallway. "You did it," he said. She exhaled slowly. "No, we did." They walked together toward the glass doors, sunlight flooding the lobby. The city outside was alive, electric, forgiving. Back across the street, Cole leaned against a lamppost, watching the woman he'd once controlled command the world that had once been his. Rage flickered in his eyes, but beneath it, something else, regret. Grace didn't turn back. The past could watch, but it couldn't follow. And as she stepped into the sunlight, the world finally saw her not as someone's wife, but as Grace Bennett, the woman who rose higher than anyone ever thought she could. The day after Grace Bennett's press conference, Manhattan was buzzing. Her speech had gone viral. Clips of her standing firm, glowing under the cameras, were spreading across every platform. Commentators called her a symbol of modern resilience. Business networks dissected her strategy. Women's organizations quoted her final line, "Every woman can rebuild herself." But while Grace's world was blooming, Cole Harrington's was crumbling in real time. Inside a dim apartment on 56th Street, Cole sat on a couch surrounded by empty takeout boxes and unopened mail. His reflection in the window was a stranger, unshaven, eyes ringed in red, hair unkempt. The news anchors on TV spoke his name like a cautionary tale. Former billionaire Cole Harrington now under SEC investigation for securities fraud, insider leaks, and document forgery. He muted the television and stared into the dark. His phone lay face down beside an untouched glass of whiskey. He hadn't received a real call in days. No investors, no friends, no Lana. Everyone had vanished the second the spotlight turned cruel. Lana's final text still sat unread. You used everyone who believed in you, including me. Don't contact me again. He closed his eyes. For years, he'd told himself he built an empire from nothing. But now that nothing had swallowed him whole, the board had voted him out. His accounts were frozen. His penthouse seized. And Grace had won. Across town, Grace sat in Titan Cloud's rooftop lounge with Adrian and Olivia, reviewing the day's media coverage. The city below glimmered like circuitry under the twilight. Adrian leaned back, smiling. You're trending in 42 countries. Even Forbes Women just called you the Phoenix of Park Avenue. Grace laughed softly. Funny. Last year, I was just the pregnant wife of a billionaire. Olivia nodded. That title aged well. Adrian handed her a champagne flute filled with sparkling apple cider. To freedom, he said. Grace clinked her glass gently. To truth. Sigh. They drank, and for a moment, peace finally felt real. But deep inside, she couldn't help thinking of the man who once held her hand at charity galas and whispered dreams of forever. She didn't miss him, but she pitied the boy he used to be before greed swallowed him whole. Meanwhile, Cole walked the empty streets near Central Park, the November air biting against his skin. He passed a newsstand plastered with Grace's face, smiling, radiant, unstoppable. He stopped and stared at it for a long time. A young vendor looked up. You know her? Cole forced a dry laugh. Used to. She's amazing, the vendor said. First time I saw her speech, my sister cried. Cole nodded silently and kept walking. When he reached the plaza, he froze. The hotel glowed under its chandeliers just like that night months ago when he'd humiliated Grace in front of the world. He could still hear the flashbulbs, the laughter, the whispers. He'd been the king of the room then. Now, the doorman didn't even recognize him. He stepped inside, walked to the same marble staircase where Grace had stood, broken and pregnant. The memory hit like a punch. For the first time in years, Cole's knees gave out. He sank onto the steps, burying his face in his hands. He whispered into the silence. I loved you once, Grace. I swear I did. But love without respect was just possession, and he had learned that too late. Outside, the rain began again, soft at first, then heavier, washing the city clean. Cole walked out into it without an umbrella, letting it soak his expensive suit, now threadbare at the edges. Across the skyline, Grace's new company logo lit up on a billboard. Bennett Technologies. Integrity builds the future. He stopped and looked up at it, water streaming down his face. And for the first time in his life, Cole Harrington understood that the empire he lost wasn't his company. It was the woman who had built it beside him, and then rose higher without him. The winter morning broke over lower Manhattan in sharp white light, glinting off the courthouse steps. Crowds had gathered long before the hearing began. Cameramen, reporters, curious onlookers all waited for the final chapter of the most talked-about scandal on Wall Street. Inside, in courtroom 6B, Grace Bennett sat at the plaintiff's table, her hands folded calmly over her growing belly. Adrian Chen sat beside her, steady as ever, while Titan Cloud's attorney, Olivia Marks, organized a fortress of evidence. At the opposite table, Cole Harrington looked like a ghost of the man who once ruled half of Manhattan's investment scene. His once tailored suit now hung loose, his eyes hollow from sleepless nights. His lawyer, Jonathan Cross, whispered urgently, but Cole barely listened. He just stared at Grace. The judge entered, an older woman with the authority of someone who had seen every kind of greed. This court will come to order, she said. We are here to finalize the intellectual property dispute between Bennett Technologies LLC and Mr. Cole Harrington. Grace's heartbeat quickened. Months of battles, sleepless nights, and fear all leading here. Olivia began, calm and deliberate. Your Honor, this case is about ownership not just of code, but of integrity. Miss Bennett's work was stolen, altered, and exploited. Every line of her innovation bears her digital signature, predating her marriage. We've submitted timestamps, source logs, and sworn statements from engineers confirming her authorship. She clicked the remote. On the screen behind her, a projection showed side-by-side code, Grace's original version and Cole's altered one. The metadata glowed with timestamps 2 years older. Cole's lawyer rose. Your Honor, those timestamps could have been manipulated. My client contributed significantly to the infrastructure that made that code viable. The judge turned her sharp gaze on him. Do you have proof? The lawyer hesitated. Before he could finish, Olivia spoke again. We also submit into evidence the original hard drive recovered from Mr. Harrington's residence, still sealed, with forensic verification. This drive contains the unedited code, and its creation date aligns with Miss Bennett's timeline. Additionally, Exhibit D emails from Mr. Harrington's personal account shows his intent to transfer ownership illegally. Cole's head snapped up. That's not possible, he shouted, his voice cracking. The judge raised a hand. Mr. Harrington, you will remain silent, the courtroom murmured. Reporters' pens raced. Olivia continued. Finally, Your Honor, Titan Cloud has submitted digital forensic reports confirming that Mr. Harrington attempted to hack into Bennett Technologies' servers last month, violating a restraining order. Cole's lawyer paled. Your Honor, if we could have a recess. Denied, the judge said. Grace sat perfectly still, her eyes fixed on the bench. The judge reviewed the files quietly, flipping through evidence that told a story more powerful than words ever could. After several minutes, she looked up. The evidence is overwhelming. This court finds that all intellectual property in question belongs solely to Miss Grace Bennett and Bennett Technologies, LLC. Furthermore, Mr. Harrington is found guilty of willful fraud and digital tampering. Restitution is ordered $5 million in damages and forfeiture of remaining assets to cover investigative costs. The courtroom erupted. Cameras flashed. Cole's face drained of all color. Grace exhaled shakily. Adrian placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Cole tried to rise. Grace, please listen to me. I never meant. She turned to face him one last time, her expression calm, almost sad. You meant every word, Cole. That's why it's over. Security stepped in as he stumbled back, defeated. Outside, the winter air was crisp and blinding. Reporters surrounded Grace, microphones thrust forward. Miss Bennett, any words after your victory? She smiled softly. This wasn't about revenge, she said. It was about respect for work, for women, for truth. Justice isn't loud. It just lasts. Flashes went off like starlight. Adrian guided her through the crowd as the courthouse doors closed behind them. And as Cole Harrington was escorted away in silence, the city that once celebrated his power now whispered a different name, the woman who took it back with grace. 6 months later, summer sunlight poured like honey over the Hamptons coastline. The ocean shimmered, calm and endless, waves brushing the sand in steady rhythm. Grace Bennett stood barefoot at the edge of the water, a soft white sundress fluttering around her ankles. In her arms, her baby boy slept peacefully, his tiny fist curled against her heart. His name was Ethan. Behind her, a small garden party was underway on the deck of a beach house that overlooked the Atlantic. It wasn't a Billionaire's gala, not a power crowd, but friends, colleagues, and family. Laughter floated in the salty air, mingling with the clink of champagne glasses. It was Grace's first real celebration. No press, no headlines, just life. Adrian Chen stood by the railing, watching her with quiet admiration. He'd seen her broken, furious, determined, and now, at last, free. When Grace turned, their eyes met. She smiled, tired but radiant. Come here, she called softly. He's finally asleep. Adrian walked over, his bare feet brushing the warm wood. You realize this is the first time I've seen you not checking your email? She laughed quietly. I promised him a day without code or court filings. She looked down at Ethan. He deserves a peaceful world. Adrian nodded. And you built one. Inside, Olivia and a few Titan engineers were setting up a small banner that read, Bennett Technologies, 1 year strong. The company had flourished beyond expectation since the verdict. New partnerships, new funding, new respect. Grace had turned her pain into policy. launching the Bennett Initiative nationwide. Her story had inspired women across the country to start, rebuild, and reclaim. "Did you ever think we'd end up here?" Adrian asked, eyes on the horizon. Grace smiled faintly. "No. But I always hoped for something quiet. Something honest." He hesitated. "You know, when Titan's board voted to merge, they wanted you to take the CEO's seat." She shook her head gently. "I don't want skyscrapers anymore. I want mornings like this." Adrian studied her face for a moment before saying softly, "You've earned them." A sea breeze lifted her hair as she turned toward him. For a long, silent moment, neither spoke. Then Adrian reached out, brushing a stray lock from her cheek. "Grace," he said quietly, "you rebuilt more than a company. You rebuilt yourself." "And I." She looked up, eyes shining. "Adrian." Before he could finish, baby Ethan stirred between them, letting out a tiny sigh. Grace smiled, breaking the tension. "He's jealous already." Adrian chuckled, shaking his head. "Smart kid." The sound of footsteps drew their attention. Lana Voss approached, dressed simply, holding a folded envelope. Grace froze, surprised but not defensive. Lana stopped a few feet away. "I didn't want to intrude," she said softly. "I just came to say thank you. You could have dragged me down with him. But you didn't." "One." Grace looked at her for a long moment, then said quietly, "You were a mistake, Lana, but not my enemy." Lana's eyes glistened. She handed Grace the envelope. "It's a letter from Cole. He asked me to deliver it before he left." Grace hesitated, then took it. Inside was a single line in Cole's handwriting. "I finally understand what you built and why I never deserved to stand beside it." She folded the note, her expression unreadable. "He's gone?" Lana nodded. "He left the country. Somewhere quiet, I think." Grace looked out at the ocean, waves folding endlessly into the horizon. "I hope he finds peace," she said softly. Lana smiled faintly, then turned and walked away. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in gold and rose, Adrian took Grace's hand. "So, what's next for you, Miss Bennett?" She looked at him, her smile slow and certain. "Living. That's enough." He squeezed her hand gently, and for the first time, she didn't flinch at happiness. And as the ocean whispered against the shore, Grace Bennett, the woman the world once pitied, finally stood in a life she had written for herself, quiet, free, and beautifully her own. So, that's how the story ends. Grace Bennett's journey wasn't just about revenge or money. It was about healing, dignity, and finding peace after being broken. If you're still here, listening until now, maybe something in her story touched you too. Maybe you've also been through moments where you had to rebuild yourself from the ground up. And if so, let this be your reminder. You can. Like Marcus Aurelius once said, the obstacle is the way. Every betrayal, every heartbreak, every loss, it isn't the end. It's the beginning of who you're meant to become. Grace didn't win because she fought harder. She won because she refused to let pain turn her bitter. That's the real strength, turning suffering into wisdom, just as Stoicism teaches. You can't control the storm, but you can control how you sail through it. So if you're watching this, take a deep breath. Forgive yourself. Keep moving forward. Because your peace, your dignity, your rebirth, it all starts with that one choice: to rise again. If Grace's story inspired you, don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe for more stories that remind you healing is always possible.